Hi, welcome to Pop Culture Maniacs. As usual, there's me, my handsome self, Kieran Freemante, and with me is the beautiful Jean Henegan. Obviously, I'm being flattering towards myself. So, Jean, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah. So we'll get cracking with this one about we'll be talking about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the latest Disney Plus show, which is just wrapped. So. Jean, you have been reviewing for Pop Culture Maniacs. If you just want to give us a quick summary of your views, especially for anyone who hasn't read the reviews.
Sure. I think overall it was disappointing to me, particularly after how interesting and different WandaVision turned out to be. I was hoping for something similar with Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I think we kind of ended up more with a 6-hour movie that had too many characters and didn't have enough time to really give them the due they deserved. And I think ultimately, when we look back on it, we'll see it more as a setup for not just the new Captain America movies, but also probably a setup for a Secret Invasion, another TV show that's coming out soon. So I think we'll get a bit more into that as we talk. But I think that's kind of what it turned out to be, is more of a homework assignment and less of a standalone TV show.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you that it was disappointing because, as I said, WandaVision was pretty inventive for a Marvel show. This just felt like diet Captain America and Captain America the Winter Soldier. So going for more of the realistic film side, but not doing it nearly as well as the Captain America films did.
Yeah, absolutely. It felt like, Captain America and Winter Soldier 2.0, but with less money and slightly less engaging characters.
Yeah, because I think it was with its marketing, it's sort of high. The first trailer, we talked offline that is that it reminded me a lot of like Hobbs and Shaw of the Fast and Furious film, and like you just thinking like with the bickering, they go, "This guy's a real asshole," but obviously there was some humor, but it was just so its tone was all over the place.
Yeah, and they pitched it in a lot of the press before it came out as kind of like a buddy comedy, like a throwback to like a Lethal Weapon and that kind of 80s buddy cop comedy. And outside of, a handful of scenes in the first or the second episode, once they got together and were talking, it really kind of lost that. And it just, it was so over, like all over the place. Yeah, with tone. I couldn't figure out what it wanted to tell us.
Yeah, and it's not like Marvel haven't done serious before. They obviously have. Again, Captain America: The Winter Soldier is probably one of the more serious films in the franchise, and it's done that well. And certainly the Netflix shows, they were a lot more serious in tone. It's just I think it's clear. It clearly shows that the writing staff weren't there for this show, and I don't know, when talking about the writing, there was so much expository dialogue, wasn't there?
Yeah, and I mean the writing I think is where the show fell apart. Like you've got competent actors who I've enjoyed in other things outside the MCU, so I know that's not the problem. They can do their work, and the direction was hampered by trying to make it an action show on TV, which is always difficult. But the writing, like they characters change their entire worldviews in a second with no explanation. I'm still trying to figure out why Carly decided to start killing people. I don't know. They never explained it. I'm trying to figure out why John Walker went from a pariah 1 minute to suddenly it's okay for him to fight next to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and we're kind of okay. Is he good? Is he bad? What's really going on there? It just nobody was for all the exposition they did, and they did a lot, explaining the 17 reasons why Sam didn't want to be Captain America and why Bucky's still depressed and sad and angry. They didn't explain character motivations well, which is weird to me.
Yeah, as you said, because I had high hopes with Carly Morgenthau when she started out, because it's that subversion in the second episode that you thought she was that she was being kidnapped, and then surprise, surprise, she actually had superpowers, and you could sort of understand her viewpoint in that. Obviously, the reverse blip has sort of changed the world so much. But again, as you say, she's trying to make her a sympathetic villain who also unwillingly kills people.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it explained by some other critics who've been writing about it as it seemed like they were trying to turn her into a killmonger who had, he has a good idea, like a key perspective that makes sense to the audience, as maybe he's not so wrong about things. And I think initially that's what Carly was. It's like she's got a worldview that makes sense to us, that these camps are clearly a problem and the governments aren't doing enough to fix it. Understandable. But then they didn't delve enough into what specifically was wrong with the camps, what was going on, what governments were doing. And it felt like as soon as they set that up as her, her mission, they realized it was going to be boring if they got into the socio-political world to the depth they needed to really explain it, that they just decided, well, we need a reason for Sam and Bucky to try to capture her, so let's just have her killing people suddenly. And it felt like they had an idea and it got aborted somehow.
Yeah, I agree, and it sort of goes back to the point of the writing being more tell or don't show, which is a big no-no in screenwriting. Generally, very rarely should you do it.
Yeah, it almost never comes off well if you have a character standing there espousing their entire manifesto.
Yeah, yeah. It is also obviously quite a shame, because obviously because there's Erin Kellyman, who seems to be a rising star, who got the role because she was in the Solo film, she was in the Les Mis BBC PBS production. So, and she does have a unique look because of her sort of red curly hair, red almost dread-like red dreads.
Yeah, and there were moments where I could see in her performance that she was trying to emote something beyond what she was given in the script and trying to get, some characterization across. And, I don't think she was the problem. I really think it was just the writers weren't sure how to get her character from potentially sympathetic villain to person trying to destroy the world in the span of 5 episodes.
Yeah, I think with the implementation of this storyline, it does make me worry how Marvel are going to handle something like a villain like Magneto when he comes about, since obviously he's done so well in the Fox films.
Yeah, this series gives me a couple worries, including, can they ever come up with, a single film villain as compelling as a Killmonger? You've got a Thanos, but Thanos had many, many films to tease out and show up and, you know, be created. But can they create a solid villain in the span of, a 2.5 hour movie, which is even less time than Falcon Winter Soldier had? And on the flip side, you know, since they're basically restarting the series with a new set of stars for the Avengers. I mean, it's characters we know before, but they're all getting promotions essentially in light of what happened in Endgame. How are we going to get to know these characters at a depth where we understand them and their motivations? Like we know what Iron Man would do in a situation because we spent so much time with them. Are they all going to start popping up on TV shows? How important are these TV shows going to be to the larger story? And is it going to become a thing where you have to watch each show to understand what's going to happen in the next 5 movies? Because if that's the case, it's going to put a huge burden on the audience that I'm not sure is sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, goes back to a point we've said in previous podcasts, like because it's much easier for a casual fan to jump into the films than it is to keep up with so many TV shows. And there's obviously issues like not everyone's going to have Disney Plus. Not same sort of thing happens with Agents of Shield, that they ended up having to become its own thing. The Netflix shows ended up pretty much sidelined, so they barely even referenced the films in later installments.
Yeah, and I've already talked to some people that I know who are casual fans and really only watch the movies because their spouse loves them, so they'll go with them, and they aren't super into these characters at the level a lot of big MCU fans are. And they were telling me with Falcon and Winter Soldier, they were bored. They didn't really understand, who these additional, like they didn't have the time or energy to figure out who John Walker is and how John Walker fits into the greater picture, who the Contessa is, and then her backstory and how she might relate to the Skrulls and the Secret Invasion. And when I started talking to them about it, their eyes glazed over and they said, "I don't have time to figure all this out. I just want to watch a show and be entertained. And I can't do that if I have to read a treatise on the history of this comic character to get an idea of what they mean."
Yeah, and I do feel like with this show, there were quite a few sort of subplots that sort of were jettisoned or not really well explained. Like I think obviously one of the big ones is Isaac, the the old soldier who was a super soldier abused by the American government and Hydra, and I just feel it should have been fleshed out a lot more.
Yeah, and the actor who played him, Carl Lumbly, is an incredibly talented character actor, and he did such a great job with just that one scene at the end of the finale with Sam and the look on his face. Like it just was an incredible performance, and it felt kind of like a throwaway storyline because it's such an interesting character. And another one of my friends who's a super MCU fan basically said, the whole point is they're creating the Young Avengers. You can tell from, his grandson's one of the Young Avengers, and now they're basically fleshing out that, superhero team. And he cynically said, yeah, it fits with Sam's story, but in reality, it also means we now know another Young Avenger that can show up later on for a whole new superhero story. And I'm like, oh man, really? If it's like a backdoor entry for another character to another team that 4 years down the line is going to show up, it's just oof.
So as well with this show, there's just I think I would describe it's like the blandest Marvel product you can think of. I think at least with WandaVision, it was a lot more different than most of the products from the MCU. Loki, which looks very interesting, it looks almost like a Terry Gilliam-esque kind of look and story. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think, was the one I was actually probably most worried about before it was screened.
Yeah, and I think and then we've talked a bit about this. I think part of the problem is that Falcon and Winter Soldier was originally supposed to be the first TV show to air.
Yeah.
But because of COVID, they weren't able to finish filming all the big action sequences in time. So WandaVision got pushed to the first film since it was so CGI, and they could do it, complete the CGI during COVID. And I feel like if Falcon Winter Soldier had come up first and that had set the bar where it is, we wouldn't have been possibly as frustrated or disappointed because all we would have known was, oh, I mean, so it's, a average to below average at times Marvel movie. That's what we got. So then when WandaVision and Loki came out of the gate looking very different with very different ideas and focus and color and vision, like all this stuff looks so different, it would have blown us away a lot more than if we were given WandaVision first and said, man, this is so creative and different and interesting and focused on pain and grief over big battles. It's so different from the MCU. And then we got your typical MCU story right after it. I think we would have had a whole different look at what Falcon and Winter Soldier was. It still wouldn't have been a great show by any means, but I feel like it would have been less disappointing.
Yeah, yeah. I would say with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because it should have really been up my alley, because I love things like James Bond, Bourne, those sort of spy franchises, and there were flashes of it. I know you weren't such a fan of the Power Broker episode, but I did quite like it as that sort of setting, like a modern day Tortuga. Is the famous pirate port, and obviously I thought that it did have that incredible action scene when Sharon Carter was having to fight back pretty much every mercenary, whilst Sam and Bucky were talking with the guy who recreated the super soldier serum. And then I think the 5th episode was the weakest one for me, because it's sort of like it was meant to be the calm before the storm. I think they may have been a bit too much calm, though.
Yeah, I mean the pacing felt weirdly off for for a TV series, which was kind of odd to me. That the key to a serialized television series is that you start, it's basically I hate saying it, but it's a long movie, but you start with your exposition laying out what the story is, and they never completely laid that out. It was kind of jumping from, is Jen Walker the villain? Is Carly the villain? What are we trying to do? Oh my gosh, now Wakanda wants Zemo, wants Zemo out. And it just felt like we're piling a bunch of ideas on top of each other. And then suddenly it was, all right, so Sharon's the power broker. We need to get that reveal out. We need to stop Carly, but we also need to make sure that Carly's ideas that were good still survive. Like, it just felt like they tangled up the threads and they were desperately trying to pull them out. But instead of starting to pull them out, in episode 4 or 5, where you should, and 6 should really be just the wrap up of the whole story. The story should peak before the finale. The finale shouldn't be where you tie up everything. And so they didn't do that in 5, which would have been the perfect time to start. They should have fought Carly in 5 and battled Carly and stopped her. That should have been the end. And then 6 could have been, what's next for Sam? What's next for Bucky? Bucky could go and complete his, penance. We could have had those moments that would wrap up their stories and get them ready for the next movie. But instead, we just kind of did nothing in 5 and then had everything happen in 6. And that was way too much.
Yeah. But as I said, if this was done as a movie, I think a lot of those subplots would have been removed or trimmed down, because at least a film could have a narrow focus, and which would have worked. It's sort of like it didn't really feel either camp. It doesn't really work as, say, 6-hour-long binge watch or as an episodic TV.
Yeah, and it felt like they wanted to trim down. By the time they got to the middle of the series, they realized they had too much and they needed to trim it down. And so they started to cut corners in a way that they shouldn't have, based on how they set up the story at the beginning. And so I think they were caught between, we have all this time, it's TV. Oh wait, it's only 6 episodes. It's not really that much time in a TV show. Maybe we should just streamline it like a film. And it ended up not giving anyone enough time.
Yeah. And we touched on it already, but it wasn't very good at handling the social political themes, really, because again, show don't tell, sort of like the muddled messaging, like the final episode, like with Sam talking to the world. Look, she might like Carly, she might have had the wrong methods, but she did have the right ideas, and it just said so ham-fisted.
Oh yeah, and I wrote in my review, like, it just didn't fit the character that we'd seen for the last 5 episodes. Yeah. And like, there were definitely important elements that they needed to bring up, particularly, how would United States react to a Black Captain America? Like, how is that going to resonate in a country that still has so much, systemic racism, and it's such an issue here. You know, what's going to happen? How are people going to react? How's the government going to like? How's this going to work? And they brought up the idea a couple times and mentioned that it could be a problem, mentioned that it was something Sam was worried about. And then suddenly he wasn't anymore. Suddenly he just decided it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be mean. People either take it or leave it. Like, I didn't get that moment of real revelation, the moment where he decided what he decided, why he decided it. He just did because he got a suit from Wakanda. And then, like you said with Carly, it just, you know, there's no there's no depth to what she was doing, why she was doing, what was happening with those camps, what was really the GRC's position on things. They just didn't flesh it out to the point where we could understand what the actual situation on the ground was. And somebody told me that they heard originally that the GRC camp story was going to be tied in with a pandemic or disease going through the camps and that being.
And yeah, I could see why that would have been
Yeah,
cut.
early on she was trying to get medicine, and so perhaps they excised that. And I don't think people would have been angry about it. Like, come on, whatever, it's a story. But it would have gave a sense of urgency to her work.
Yeah,
that we didn't get.
I think we can definitely say this though. Tony Stark really screwed up the world with resetting the blip. I think the joke I like to make is like, it was well, no, the blip reverses if you disappeared when you're on a plane. So did you basically get resurrected just to fall to your death once again?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't fault the writers of the show for basically having to explain the blip and what happened afterwards, because it sucks that the Russo brothers didn't do that work for them and just kind of was like, hey, here's the bag, go for it. But that explanation, and then the other explanation that I saw got a lot of press and a lot of confusion was, so Sam doesn't get paid for being the Falcon. Like, nobody gives him money. He has no money. He can't get a bank loan. Did Tony Stark not set up some sort of slush fund for all the Avengers? Like, how did he drop that ball? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I thought at least because he was a soldier beforehand, you'd have thought at least he would have been, even then he would have at least had like a government salary of some sort.
Also, like, he's just out of the goodness of his heart going into battle situations to help the US government. Like, what? They're not, why? Why would you bother doing that if they're not going to pay you to do it?
Yeah, I think sometimes there are questions that you don't want answered. It's all like the plot hole, how with the Hulk, every time he changes, is how does his trousers stay on? I think, yeah, that's a plot hole I can live with, or inconsistent.
Yeah,
I can. It's
how does this
consistency.
trousers become those exact pair of trousers?
Yeah, yeah. So like, I
Right,
think
like, I'm
that.
cool with the plot hole of the money,
Yeah,
but don't give me a scene where he can't get a bank loan and then force me to think about it, because that
yeah.
just asks me to be like, well, why doesn't he get paid? What's going on?
Surely it isn't. With most superheroes, isn't it? So like a side gig, sort of like you're like your Spider-Mans, or even Bruce Wayne's obviously a billionaire, but you get it. That Bruce Wayne, Tony Stark, businessman, Peter Parker, photographer, university student. Wonder Woman, the most recent Wonder Woman film, she was working for the Smithsonian. It wasn't her day. Being Wonder Woman wasn't her day job.
Yeah, and I feel like Bucky just wanders around looking sinister and doesn't have a job, and Sam apparently doesn't have a job. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this.
Yeah, that's actually just reminded me, because well, it was quite clear, like that was a storyline they were thinking of for Bucky, is could Zemo get him back into the dark side, resurrect this sort of Winter Soldier persona and get him back to being an assassin or brainwashed or whatever. And again, that felt like it didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, for as much as I've complained about, not enough character development for everybody, I feel like Bucky was the one who was least served by this series. He really, he should have been a lead, a full lead, should have been about his journey as well. But he essentially became the sidekick to the new Captain America again.
Yeah.
He fought a lot. He clearly has severe PTSD and all these psychological traumas that I guess the show thinks are wiped away and are fine now because he talked to people and made amends, but we didn't see that, which would have been great because then we could have seen Bucky do something. But it felt like he didn't really end up with the story. He just was there.
Yeah. As we've already touched on with John Walker's characterization, it's so inconsistent because it started off with him like him showing him having lots of doubts, taking on the Captain America mantle, which is fine. I knew that because his character becomes US agent, that he become, and like if it was like based on the 80s storyline, that he was going to be sort of more like the worst aspects of Captain America, or America as a whole, being nothing more than a government agent doing all of America's dirty work. But I said, it just, he went from sort of pretty sympathetic in the Star-Spangled Man, then deteriorated really quickly. And as you said, in the finale, suddenly he's a good guy again.
It was so weird to me because, they planted the seed of, Lamar telling him in his first episode, you can't punch your way out of things anymore. So they set it up to be like, this guy has anger problems. He's in the past. He's done some stuff that's been borderline. Watch out for him. And then we see it come to a head when Lamar dies, which still didn't love that. I thought that was very plot devicey. And then, he's, not a good Captain America, but why? Is it just because he went off when his best friend was killed in front of him? Like, is that what we're supposed to condemn him for? Because it wasn't great, but there's extenuating circumstances. I'd be willing to talk through it. And then, like you said, suddenly he's back fighting alongside everybody. Nobody's angry. We're all good. But then, Contessa's back, turns him into US agent. And depending on what they're doing with her in the storyline, he could be working for, a group of Skrulls who are trying to infiltrate the country, or she could just be trying to create, the Thunderbolts. I don't know what's going on there, but someone told me it felt like, they had a path for him. They were going to go with that 80s comic arc where, he's got all the negative traits of Captain America and it all just falls apart. But then, Kevin Feige rolled in and was like, oh, by the way, here's our entire future plan for him. You can't make him too bad because we can't pull him back from that. So he needs to be rebooted back to potentially morally gray. But, he's not a bad guy. He just made a mistake.
Yeah. I do feel sorry for Wade Russell, though, because he was abused on social media, and to the point that he basically quit social media because he's not our Captain America. And you're thinking, he's an actor, he's playing a character. B, Captain America's a fictional character. It's fictional.
And C, you're not supposed to want him to be Captain America. Like, that's the point.
Yes, exactly. You're
supposed to want Sam to be it. Like, that's the show, guys. It's not. But yeah, and also I just want to plug Wyatt Russell has a really incredible, fun, chill TV show he did called Lodge 49. And if you have Hulu in the States, you should check it out because it really shows his full range of he's such a charismatic actor.
Admittedly, every time I heard his voice, I kept thinking he sounded like Bill Paxton.
Well, the crazy thing too is like his dad, of course, is Kurt Russell's mom's Goldie Hawn, and his eyes, like his entire top part of his face, it's like you took Kurt Russell's face and just put it on him. Like it's eerie how much they look alike.
Yeah, that's genetics for you.
Oh yeah. And does that mean that he's like Star-Lord's brother? Since Kurt Russell.
Oh yeah. It's just like the MCU is just like a massive web. It just or no, more like a massive vortex just sucking up every known actor.
Every actor is going to be in it by the time we're done.
Yeah. So yeah, we were both a bit disappointed by Winter Soldier. So I would say for me, decent action, some decent spy movie stuff, but after a fairly decent start, it goes downhill.
Yeah, and I would say just too many ideas, just not fully executed for me.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening. Like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Obviously subscribe, like us, leave comments. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.